All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling something that can be, honestly, a little bit stressful. Family finances. We're talking about those money matters that, let's be real, can cause some headaches, some arguments, even some sleepless nights.
Absolutely. It's a topic that a lot of folks would rather just avoid altogether.
Yeah, but here's the thing. We can't just bury our heads in the sand, right? The more we understand these challenges, the better equipped we are to actually overcome them, and that's where this deep dive comes in.
Right on. Knowledge is power, as they say.
We're taking a close look at a really insightful article called The Impact of Family Financial Problems, Challenges, and Solutions. Think of it as our roadmap for this conversation.
Love that, a roadmap.
And our mission. Well, we want to break down this complex topic into, manageable chunks, offer some practical advice, and hopefully leave you feeling a little bit more empowered, a little bit less stressed. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
Perfect. So the article doesn't sugarcoat anything. It jumps right in, laying out some of the most common culprits that can strain family finances. And, job loss is a big one, obviously. We've all seen how devastating that can be.
Yeah, that's a major one for sure.
But I was really struck by how the article went beyond just the surface level, talking about something called concentration risk.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's basically what happens when a family relies too heavily on a single income source.
Ah, I see. It's like, what's that saying? Putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And if that basket falls...
Well, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Much bigger impact than if you had, spread things out a bit. Diversified.
Makes total sense. And of course, then there's debt. I mean, that's a big one, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
Can't really talk about financial strain without talking about debt.
But the article, it goes beyond just saying debt is bad. It digs into the mechanics of, how high interest rates can trap families.
Right.
And I'm curious, for someone who's maybe only ever heard, high interest is bad, what's the real danger there? What's the nuance?
Well, it's not just that you're paying extra, right? It's how that extra money, that interest, it balloons over time. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. Starts small, but picks up more and more snow. It's bigger and bigger, harder to stop.
Okay, I'm with you.
Imagine you're only making those minimum payments on a credit card. Even if it's a small balance, it can take years, even decades, to pay off because most of your money is going towards the interest, not the actual debt. It's a vicious cycle.
That's a powerful image, that snowball effect. And it makes those 0% APR for 12 months offers seem, a little bit trickier, right?
Yeah, they can be.
Because, what happens after that introductory period ends? That interest rate, it probably skyrockets.
Exactly. That's why it's so important, so crucial, to really understand the terms and conditions of any loan, any credit card, before you sign on the dotted line. The article even suggests seeking advice from a financial professional, before making any big financial commitments.
It's like getting a second opinion before a big medical procedure, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure you understand all the potential implications, the risks, the benefits.
Perfect analogy. And it's not just job loss and debt we're talking about here. Unexpected medical bills, even with insurance, can throw a wrench into things.
Oh, yeah.
Big time. The article points out that those deductibles, those copays, they can still add up to a significant financial burden, even if you think you're protected.
It's like a financial blind spot, You think you're covered, and then bam, hit with costs you weren't prepared for. I'm guessing this is where that whole emergency fund thing comes into play. Having a little cushion set aside for those just-in-case moments.
Absolutely. It's like having a financial shock absorber, right? It can really help soften the blow of those unexpected expenses. And the good news is it doesn't have to be a huge amount.
Okay, good.
The article really stresses that even starting small, consistently adding to it, that's what matters.
So it's more about building that habit of saving rather than trying to amass like a huge lump sum all at once.
Exactly.
Is there a specific amount the article recommends, like a magic number for that emergency fund?
Well, it varies, depending on individual circumstances.
Yeah.
But they suggest aiming for 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses.
Okay, that makes sense.
Might sound a bit daunting, but remember, it's a long-term goal. It's about building that safety net over time.
All right, so we've got job loss, debt, medical bills, and then, of course, there's the ever-increasing cost of living. I mean, it feels like a constant uphill battle these days, especially with, rising housing costs, inflation.
It can feel that way for sure. And the article acknowledges that sense of of feeling squeezed, like you're constantly playing catch up. But it also points out that sometimes our perception of needs versus wants gets a little blurry in this kind of environment.
Interesting. So it's not just about those external factors, those rising costs, but also our own spending habits, our priorities. Is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. The article argues that understanding the psychology of spending, how marketing influences our choices, all of that, that can be just as important as understanding, interest rates or budgeting techniques.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good grasp, I think, on some of the common financial stressors that families face. But what about the consequences? I mean, it's not just about the numbers in your bank account, right?
You're absolutely right. The numbers are important, but they're only part of the story. The article really highlights that emotional and relational toll that financial problems can take. That constant worry, arguments, strained relationships, it can create this ripple effect impacting every aspect of family life.
That makes sense. I mean, money is so deeply tied to our sense of security, our well-being. It's bound to affect our relationships, our mental health. And the article goes on to say that children are especially vulnerable in these situations. It's heartbreaking to think about the long-term impact financial stress can have on kids.
It really is.
Yeah.
It can limit their opportunities, affect their educational outcomes, even shape their future attitudes towards money. Growing up witnessing constant financial strain, it can be incredibly damaging. It can really leave a lasting mark.
That's a sobering thought. It really highlights, I think, the urgency of addressing these issues head on. But before we get too bogged down in the doom and gloom, the article does offer solutions, right? Give us some hope here.
Definitely. I wouldn't be much of an expert if I just left you hanging with all the problems, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a deep dive without exploring some solutions. And trust me, this article doesn't disappoint. It lays out a range of practical strategies, both short-term fixes and those longer-term approaches.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the first step families can take to start regaining control? So when we're talking about regaining control, the article does a really nice job of structuring those solutions. It starts with those immediate actions families can take, sort of like stop the bleeding measures,
Right. Like when
Yeah.
you're in a crisis, you need those immediate steps, those things you can do right now to just kind of stabilize the situation.
Exactly. And a lot of these initial steps, they revolve around creating a little bit of breathing room in your budget.
Makes sense. Got to find some wiggle room.
But here we go again, the dreaded B word, budgeting. I know. A lot of people, they hear that word and they shut down. They think restriction, deprivation. It doesn't exactly sound like a fun solution.
Yeah, it definitely gets a bad rap. But the article, it actually frames budgeting in a much more, I guess you could say, empowering way.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, it's not about punishing yourself or giving up everything you enjoy. It's more about making conscious choices.
Yeah.
It's about being intentional with your spending.
Okay, I like that. Being intentional.
Right. Instead of just kind of, mindlessly swiping your card and hoping for the best. And one tip the article gives, I thought this was really clever, is to just track your spending for a week without changing anything.
Oh, that's interesting. Like a spending diary.
Exactly. Just write it down, every dollar you spend. That way, you can really see where your money is actually going without any judgment.
Ooh, that's sneaky. It's like holding up a mirror to your spending habits. You might be surprised by what you discover, honestly.
You might be. Or you might find that you're actually pretty good at managing your money, but there's always room for improvement.
Right. It's all about awareness.
Exactly. Once you see those patterns, then you can start to decide, okay, what do I want to tweak? What adjustments can I make? But it doesn't have to feel like you're giving up everything you enjoy.
I like that. Adjustments, not sacrifices.
Right. Small tweaks can make a big difference over time.
The article also mentions negotiating with creditors, which sounds, I don't know, kind of intimidating. Is that something families should seriously consider?
Absolutely. It can be a little nerve-wracking, I get it, but the article emphasizes that a lot of creditors, they're actually willing to work with you, especially if you're proactive. Things like lowering interest rates or waiving late fees, those are often on the table if you just ask.
So it's about advocating for yourself and exploring all the available options.
Exactly. I mean, creditors, they'd rather get something than nothing, right?
Right. Makes sense.
So it's definitely worth having that conversation.
All right. And while you're working on those immediate fixes, like negotiating with creditors, the article also encourages starting an emergency fund ASP. We talked about that a bit earlier, but I'm curious, what are some practical tips they give for actually building that fund? Because it can feel daunting, especially if you're already stretched thin.
Yeah, I get it. But they have some really good suggestions. One is to automate your savings. Even if it's just like $5 or $10 per paycheck, it adds up over time. And you don't even have to think about it. It's just happening automatically.
Oh, I like that. Out of sight, out of mind, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then they also suggest looking for what they call found money.
Found money.
Yeah, like those unexpected windfalls, a tax refund, a birthday gift, maybe you sell some stuff you don't need anymore. That money, that can go straight into your emergency fund.
Okay, so it's about finding those little opportunities, those little pockets of money that you can kind of redirect.
Right. It all adds up. It's about building that habit, that muscle of saving.
Okay, so we've covered those short-term tactics, those things you can do right now to kind of gain some control. But the article doesn't stop there. It really emphasizes the importance of a longer-term mindset shift when it comes to, family finances. What does that look like? What are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, it's about moving beyond just reacting to problems, putting out fires, and moving into a more proactive space where you're actually building a solid financial foundation for the future.
Okay, I like that. Building a foundation.
And financial education, that plays a huge role here.
So it's about becoming more financially literate.
Exactly. Understanding how money works, how to manage it effectively.
But where do families even start with that? It can feel so overwhelming, like there's a whole secret language you need to learn.
Oh, I totally get it. It can be intimidating. But the good news is you don't have to become a financial expert overnight. The article recommends starting simple, with the basics, understanding things like budgeting, saving, investing.
Okay, so breaking it down into bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. And the great thing is, there are so many resources available to help you do this. There's tons of free information online, at your local library, even community workshops. You can learn at your own pace in a way that feels comfortable for you.
So it's about finding resources that fit your learning style and comfort level. Not everyone needs to, become a stock market whiz overnight.
Right, right. It's about empowering yourself to make informed decisions about your money. The article argues that when you have that financial knowledge, it helps you avoid those predatory lending practices, and it helps you make choices that are aligned with your long-term goals.
It's like having a financial GPS, right?
Right.
Helping you navigate towards your destination instead of just driving around aimlessly.
Exactly. And speaking of destinations, setting those long-term goals is another crucial aspect that the article emphasizes. It might feel far off, especially when you're dealing with more immediate pressures, but having those goals, things like retirement savings or college funds for your kids, that can be really motivating. It can help you stay on track.
It's like that saying, a goal without a plan is just a wish. So we need both, right? The big picture vision and those practical steps to actually get there.
Exactly. And, speaking of planning for the future, the article also talks about the importance of involving kids in these conversations.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm all for teaching kids about financial literacy early on, but how do you approach that without, scaring them off or making it too complicated?
Right. Well, it's all about having age-appropriate conversations, meeting them where they're at.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, for younger kids, it could be as simple as, letting them help with the grocery budgeting or explaining why you compare prices at different stores, even just having a piggy bank, that teaches them the concept of saving. It plants those seeds early on.
Right, starting with the fundamentals.
Exactly. And as they get older, you can start to introduce more complex concepts like investing or, the importance of credit. But the key is to keep it engaging, to make it relevant to their lives.
Okay, so we're building that foundation, setting goals, involving the kids. But I feel like there's a deeper level here, too. The article mentions a mindset shift when it comes to money. What exactly does that entail?
Yeah, it's about moving from a scarcity mindset to one of abundance, even if, your current circumstances feel far from abundant.
Okay, that sounds a little, woo-woo to some people. But I kind of get it. If you're constantly focused on what you don't have, it's hard to make positive changes, right?
Right. The article argues that a mindset of abundance, even if it starts small, it helps you see opportunities, it helps you make smarter choices, and it can actually attract more positive financial outcomes into your life.
It's like that saying, you attract what you focus on.
Exactly. So instead of dwelling on lack, on what you don't have, you're actively seeking solutions. You're looking for possibilities. You're focusing on what you can do to improve your situation.
Okay, so we've got this toolkit of knowledge, a more positive outlook, but what are some concrete, actionable steps our listeners can take right now to start moving in the right direction? All right, so we've talked about a lot in this deep dive. We've gone from like those nitty-gritty details of high interest debt all the way to, the kind of more philosophical side of things like cultivating that abundance mindset. But let's bring it all together now. What are some things our listeners can actually do starting like today to make a difference in their family's finances?
I'm so glad you asked that because, it's easy to get caught up in the learning and the information, but it's the doing, the taking action that really creates change. So, yeah, let's talk about some concrete steps inspired by the article that can get you moving in the right direction.
I'm ready. Hit me with those action items.
Okay, so first up, and I know we've mentioned this a few times already, but it's worth repeating, revisit your budget.
Ugh, the B word again. I know. Budgeting can feel like super restrictive, but you're saying it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. This isn't about creating some crazy, strict, joyless spending plan. It's just about getting clear on where your money is actually going. Awareness is key.
So it's like a financial checkup. Before you can make any changes, you got to know what you're working with, right?
That's a great way to put it. So start by just tracking your spending, maybe for a week, maybe for 2 weeks. Doesn't matter how you do it. Use an app, use a spreadsheet, whatever works for you. The important thing is to be honest with yourself and don't judge. Just observe.
Just get those numbers down on paper. I can see how that would be super helpful. Okay, what's next?
All right, so once you have a clearer picture of your spending habits, then you can start to identify some areas where maybe you can make some adjustments, little tweaks here and there.
Like maybe that daily latte becomes a twice-a-week treat, or packing lunch a few days a week instead of eating out every day. Those small changes, they can really add up over time, right?
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not about cutting out everything you enjoy. It's about making choices that are aligned with your goals, with your values.
It's about finding that balance. Okay, I'm on board with that. Now, the article also talked about negotiating with creditors, which honestly sounds kind of scary to me. What advice would you give to someone who's like hesitant to even make that call?
I get it. It can feel really intimidating. But remember, creditors are businesses, and they want to get paid. Often, they're actually more willing to work with you than you might think, especially if you're proactive and you reach out to them.
So before you even miss a payment or, get behind, it's a good idea to just pick up the phone and see what your options are.
Exactly. Explain your situation honestly, be upfront about what you can and can't afford, and see what they can offer. You might be surprised by their willingness to negotiate things like a lower interest rate, or maybe waiving some late fees, or even setting up a more manageable payment plan for you.
It's about advocating for yourself.
Exactly. And, while you're tackling those more immediate challenges, don't forget about that emergency fund. We keep coming back to this, but it's so important. Even if you can only set aside a tiny bit each week, it all adds up. And it's that consistency that matters most.
It's like that saying, slow and steady wins the race.
All right, so we've covered those practical steps, those things you can do right now to gain some control. But what about those longer-term strategies? The article emphasized investing, which can feel pretty intimidating, especially for someone who's brand new to it. Where's a good place to start?
Yeah, investing can definitely seem like a whole other world, but it's really not as complicated as it seems. And you don't have to be a Wall Street expert to get started.
That's reassuring.
The key is to start small, do your research, and learn as you go. There are tons of resources available online and at your local library that can break down those investing basics for you. And, starting small is key because even small, consistent contributions can really grow over time thanks to compound interest. It's like that snowball effect we talked about earlier, but in a good way.
Exactly. It's the magic of compounding. And speaking of long-term thinking, don't forget about retirement planning.
Oh, yeah. Retirement can feel like a lifetime away, but it's never too early to start planning.
Right. And the sooner you start saving, the better off you'll be in the long run. So take advantage of any employer-sponsored retirement plans if you have them, and also consider opening an individual retirement account, an IRA. Even small contributions can make a big difference over time.
Okay, so we've got investing, retirement planning. Any other long-term strategies we should be thinking about?
Well, I think this one ties everything together. Never stop learning. Make financial education a priority. The more you learn about personal finance, the more confident and empowered you'll feel in managing your money. And that knowledge, that's a powerful tool to have.
I love that. Knowledge is power. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's that one takeaway message you want our listeners to walk away with?
I want them to remember that financial well-being, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, challenges, setbacks, but with the right knowledge consistent action, and a positive mindset, you can create a more secure and fulfilling financial future for yourself and your family.
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. And on that note, we'll sign off. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of family finances. We hope you feel empowered and inspired to take control of your financial journey.
Until next time, happy diving.